Info News Show. We are already back here again. We're back in the building again with another show for you. This time we're going to talk about the big guy. Yeah, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yowie, whatever you want to call this guy, right? So, and it's not so much to talk about if Bigfoot or Sasquatch is out there, because I'll just start by saying this. I have interviewed a lot of people, and I'm a no BS kind of person, and I have a great BS detector. Let's start there. Bigfoot is one of the most elusive parts of the phenomena if you really look at it. I'm going to definitely go over, the standards. What are the standards for evidence there, right? I just feel like with this being a story being told over thousands of years, when we talk about going back to even the indigenous tribes and all the times that I guess you can call it a creature or an entity, or some people will call it a human, some form of human, but these things have been around and have been reported on for hundreds, thousands of years. We'll just say thousands of years. So I don't doubt that there's something out there that is fitting this description. I don't doubt a lot of accounts. And as I said before, I've interviewed a lot of people, and some people you can tell if they're being disingenuous or not. I've talked to people where I walked away and said, this person was talking from a real place, right? So I'm giving it that. And I think a lot of people can agree with me out there. I know some of you have actually had the experience encountering this elusive creature, but I'll tell you what, you won't find me out in the woods, so I don't know that I would ever be the one to kind of, boots on the ground, be the guy that discovers and finds Bigfoot. But I do think there's definitely something to it. And, my question has always been with all the people I've interviewed on this topic, is why hasn't this moved forward? And then if we sit and look at data, like what is the standard for evidence? Like if we're trying to get to answers about, and the truth on Bigfoot and saying, okay, we want to make sure that this is solidified as something that's out there and something people truthfully should be concerned about. I know I would. With Sasquatch out there, I'm already afraid of bears and mountain lions, the things we do know about out there in the woods. So I for dang sure would want to be fully aware if there's something like a Sasquatch out there as well, right? And then you have groups of people who go out there, families who go out for recreational purposes, go out, hang out on the lake, let's go skiing. I can tell you a story about I went with a friend, and this is actually pretty cool story. Actually, I went out, and this is in my early 20s. I had a friend that was getting married, and he had a bachelor party in the woods of all places. So we got a bunch of guys together, a bunch of the friends. We all went out to Lake Ice House or Ice House Lake, right off of Highway 50 or 80. No, it's probably 80. I think it's got to be 80. It's in California, Northern California, right near the Nevada border. So we go out there, we're having a great time. We're inflatable rafts. We're rafting out to the island out there. And when it comes time to go to, to lay it down for the night, we all pitch tents, right? And I'm feeling kind of secure because, there's at least 15, 20 of us there. And so we're all together, a bunch of tents and, like a little community. So I'm feeling kind of safe and kind of okay. So I get out, we do our thing, we go to sleep, we wake up the next morning to continue on with our day, and we wake up We're about, I'd say, 100 feet, 150 feet from the edge of the lake. We walk down to the lake, gonna go fishing, swimming, all the above, and we see bear prints all around the lake. So a bear had come in the middle of the night. We were totally unaware, and he walked right around the lake. No telling if he walked through the camp or what. So just knowing, being out there and being in that pitch black dark, and finding out after the fact that there was some sort of predator out there, was kind of unsettling. And I swore to myself from that day forward, you would never find me in a tent again. And if I do go back out to the woods, it will be in a trailer or an RV, something that's fully protected from the elements and creatures and things of that nature out there. I just can't do it. So we things are out there. It's scary at night, and if you add Sasquatch into that mix, had I even known at the time that this was a thing, I probably wouldn't even went with that concern. So I just wanted to get that story out, but definitely welcome to the show. We're going to talk about this today, and not necessarily debunk or verify if Bigfoot is a real thing. Because as I said, I think I talked to enough people to know that there's definitely a group of people who have been in the woods and have seen something that they describe as something big, tall, hairy, 10 feet tall, makes these crazy noises, throws rocks, all these sorts of things. And, it's just when we look on the global stage, right? If we go to Congress, we can't really talk to Congress about Bigfoot today, right? Because I don't think the evidence is there. I don't think it's been validated enough to be brought into that global or national conversation, even though people are experiencing this around the world. But, it's just the data I don't feel like is there. And what can we do to kind of advance that narrative? Because we're all about getting to the truth, moving the needle, and we want to make sure, the same as UFOs, the same as any other part of the phenomena, paranormal, we want to make sure that we get answers to all this stuff, however they come, right? So I had some ideas. I thought about it, and we'll kind of go over some of that stuff. We'll go over some history here as well. Let me go ahead and see who has joined us here for this show. Unique show. I don't really do a lot of Bigfoot stuff, a lot of Bigfoot shows, just because the research, the people out there conducting research, I don't feel have set standards. There's definitely a group that has, but for the most part, the community as a whole, I don't think as has laid the proper groundwork for gathering and submitting evidence to get to a point where this is validated, to where we can get those beware of Sasquatch signs posted in every national forest across the globe, right? Or wherever these things may be located. So that's the goal here today. That is the goal. That's the angle that we will take. And let me see who's come in. I do see Bim Jim out there. Bim Jim starting out talking about, I'm in the place where the word Sasquatch came from. Sightings are so common here that people hardly take notice. And see, that's what I'm talking about. It's a situation where you have a lot of people to talk about it. There is going to be a portion of those people who are just making things up. We know that. But then there's definitely a portion of people who are actually experiencing things. And so that's good to hear there, Bim Jim. Thanks for coming in. Polly Rodderman, shout out to you. Much love. And stay safe out there, Polly. I'm concerned about you right now, and I just hope everything is going okay. Make sure you keep yourself safe, and just keep us posted on everything. Thanks for coming in as well, especially with everything going on. Thank you for taking the time out to even come to the show tonight. So appreciate you. That's big, and I appreciate it. We got Amy WC is am early arranging the snack table. Okay, get the snack table together. You're gonna need some, because we're gonna go into it. We won't be here too long, right? This show normally runs about an hour, maybe a little over an hour, but we're gonna definitely make sure that we serve its purpose here today. Who else do we have? We got Dev from Sacramento. Hey, Polly, so glad you're okay. I agree with that, Dev from Sac. Who else is out here? Who else has joined us? Anyone else here? Are we here? I know people are going to catch this on the replay. This isn't normally a topic that we touch, but I want to validate Sasquatch and Bigfoot and kind of make it a thing. Yeah, Tim James is in the building saying, "Yo, yo, yo, Mr. Rob G, what's up, Tim James? Thanks for coming on in. Appreciate you showing on up." And who else do we have? Let's keep it moving. Uh, yeah, Yowie Yeti. I didn't say Yeti. It's Yeti as well. Yeti is going to be one as well. Lil Cat 51 is present. Love that. Appreciate you coming on in. Let's see. Who else do we have out here? Let's get current. Magneticus, bro. Haven't seen you for a minute. Shout out to Magneticus Attractus, one of the day one guys here, man. Appreciate you showing on up. Who else is out there? Monica. Hey, Monica. Hola, hola, Monica. ¿Cómo está? ¿Cómo está usted? Juliana McGill, Squatch time with Mr. Rob G. Don't say that too loud. Dave might be watching. You know how Dave feels about that word, but I'm with you. It's okay. Sasquatch, sassy Squatch, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yowie, Yeti, whatever you want to call him. I call him the big guy. Let's see. Okay, who else has come on in? Okay, we're good, but Polly has a great idea. She says, don't forget to hit that like. If we could, I promise you're going to like it. Let's go ahead and stop real quick. Hit the like button for me. Let's get those likes up. Tell a friend, and let's go ahead and do that. Amy WC saying, check that Spanish out. Yeah. You know, I'm okay. I'm okay. All right. So let me go ahead and get us into the show. And I think, let me see here. Okay, here we go. All right, all right. UFO, the definitive UFO news show, but today we'll be covering Sasquatch. And let me make sure I got all my stuff together because I definitely want to make sure my screen doesn't time out on us here. All right. Yeah, yeah. So the elusive Sasquatch, is out there. He's out there. I won't be the one to discover him personally, like I said. So shout out to like Dave Scott, Tim James for going on out there and being those guys to do that. I'll definitely make sure that if anything, if Sasquatch does anything to you guys, I'll tell the story of how great you guys were, how brave you were to be the ones to step out there because somebody has to do it in order to gather the data. That's where you have to go to gather the data. There's nowhere else. You have to go there, right? So bravo to you guys for doing that. Okay, yeah, with aliens being more so considered to be physical, and this is one of the things I was thinking about, so I wrote this down. With aliens being more so considered to be physical and ghosts and apparitions to be considered non-physical or dimensional, and Sasquatch being considered a little bit of both when you talk about interdimensional and sometimes the physical aspect. Why do we have overwhelming photographic video evidence of aliens and spirits, but not so much on Bigfoot? That's the question. This conversation will hopefully help balancing out those numbers and finally validate Bigfoot, give it the credit it deserves. Because as it stands, you can walk into many circles and get laughed out the room when you talk about Bigfoot. You could walk into a UFO conversation and talk about Bigfoot and get laughed out the room. You could walk into a paranormal conversation, talk about Bigfoot, and get laughed out the room. So we want to stop that. We want to make sure that we understand that, as I say on the After Hours show, phenomena is real, period. So let's start there, which means that anything and everything that's under that is possible. definitely possible. And as we go ahead and before we jump into the meat and potatoes, let me make sure everybody knows that we have a phone number here that you can call anytime. 856 843 3444. That's 856 the dig. Or if you're outside the United States, like our guest Polly here, you can dial 001 first, then 856 843 3444, or 001 856 the dig. Also, I want to say what's up to our members. I did update the list, so this is current. Memberships are available on this channel. That's how we get this or keep this thing going. That's how the show is produced. That's how we make sure that we can be in a position to continue to raise the bar. And our members as of today: T-Bone, The Beekeeper, D. Nunley, Maggie M10, Flat Six, Miss Catherine Jones, Leanne Bridges, Polly Rodderman, Lil Cam 51, Frankie B, and Fast Timmy. Thank you all so much for helping this thing go around, making it possible to pay these subscriptions and all the fees that we have to pay to put this show together. Thank you so much for your support. Also, we're jumping right on into the show. So, Sasquatch missing. Has anyone captured quality evidence of Bigfoot? Is there any proof? Is there any proof? Can you just stop, think of any situations where you can say, yeah, that's proof. That's for sure. Locks it down. That shows you that Bigfoot is authentic, that Bigfoot is real. Can you think of evidence that's been presented? I can think of some compelling things. I can think of some things that make you say, but I can also say that evidence is sporadic. And as I've talked to different Sasquatch Bigfoot researchers out there that are out in the field, one thing that most of them, if not all of them, all agree on is that there is no unification within the Bigfoot community between researchers and sharing evidence. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that the Bigfoot community has is the data that people gather, they're not sharing. And we understand why some of the people who aren't telling the truth aren't sharing data because you're not collecting data. You're just making up stories, right? To fit in with the cool crowd, right? Or to try to monetize a situation. That's not how you get to the truth. That is not. So, the way that this starts out, the way that we can just kind of start it out and say this is why Bigfoot is likely something that is real is that we can go back to the indigenous peoples, the native tribes, not just in your local area, but globally around the world, all have different stories about a creature that seems to be describing a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot. You know, we're talking about going back to a time where you didn't know who lived on the other side of the world. You couldn't get together like we're doing now on a live and talk to someone across the world. So how do these stories or how do they stay so similar with these people never talking or meeting? That's always the most compelling part of the Bigfoot conversation. So centuries before modern technology like trail cams and smartphones, native tribes across North America shared oral histories recounting encounters with giant hairy beings roaming the forest. These tales were rich with details of enormous footprints far too large to belong to any known animal. Fast forward to today, and similar accounts persist, often emerging from isolated regions untouched by human presence. The immense size, depth, and stride of these mysterious tracks defy comparison with any known wildlife. And that was one thing when I was growing up, you know, I wasn't into Bigfoot, but I would see the occasional photograph of a Bigfoot footprint, and I'm like, wow, that is a big foot. That, no pun intended, that's a huge foot, right? And it was always something that was like, wow, I wonder what made that footprint. That was always something that I would think, right? And then you live life, you don't think about it again. Then it comes up again, you ask the same question, and it kind of goes like that, right? So until I got into the phenomena, and began talking to people who had actually encountered these things, that's when it started to hit home. Because I'll tell you, when I initially started, there was a show I used to do called Why the Big Secret. I was co-hosting with Rob Martin over there, and that was only 3 years ago, roughly. And even at that time, I wasn't so sure about Sasquatch. But then, granted, I hadn't talked to or interviewed anyone who had encountered one, so it was just being ignorant to the fact that there's more to what we think we know, right? So footprints have long been pivotal in Bigfoot investigations, offering tangible imprints left behind by an elusive creature. These large human like tracks often display dermal ridges and unique stride patterns inconsistent with human footfalls. Indigenous tribes have recounted stories of, quote, wild men whose massive footprints emboss the forest floor, reinforcing the belief in a creature that walks among us, unseen yet leaving traces of its passage. The unseen part, right? That's what gets me. And I guess what we'll do is later on the show, I have some propositions and some ideas on maybe some ways that we can kind of break through the ability to capture these things, and then the willingness, because there's some of that going on too in the community where some people just aren't willing to do it. And you have to ask yourself why, right? Because that doesn't help the conversation. Someone that wants to verify, validate Bigfoot, and they're like, "Hey, we need something. We need proof. We need something." And then the person telling the Bigfoot story tells you that they don't want to get the data or they don't want to get the evidence. Then guess where Bigfoot stays? In Storyland. It stays in a place where it can't be validated, right? We have to change that sort of thinking here, and hopefully we can start to do that here tonight. Now, one of the most infamous for me, one of the first things that I saw on Bigfoot was the Patterson Gimlin film, and most of you have seen it. I'm gonna go ahead and run it real quick because I do have happen to have the video on me. This was what, for me, kind of started this whole conversation. Probably don't need the music. But as you can see, a creature that they captured, let's see, I actually have, this is visual evidence. Okay, this is Patterson Gimlin film. Visual evidence remains one of the most debated aspects of Bigfoot lore. In the Patterson Gimlin film, captured in 1967, is perhaps the most iconic footage depicting a large bipedal figure striding through the Bluff Creek of California. Despite extensive scrutiny, the film remains a cornerstone of Bigfoot evidence, with proponents citing its anatomical realism and detractors pointing to the potential hoax elements, right? Like they say he's wearing a suit. And you have that whole argument and situation. I still don't know where to fall on that. I'm kind of back and forth on Patterson Gimlin. At times it looks like a suit, but I saw recently there's a video that's supposed to come out here in the next few months where someone has used AI to kind of clear up the video, kind of enhance it, and they zoom in on the face, which here, I don't know if you can really see that well. Let's see if we can get this full screen here. So the face, they get a good zoom in on the face, and I got to tell you, the enhanced version of this photo, you can start to see the actual features of the face. And man, I was pretty surprised at what it was that I was seeing. So, Patterson Gimlin, like I said, I know at one point in time we talked about this, and I didn't know where I stood on it. I didn't know where I felt, but I'll tell you what, it is definitely, I think, probably more to it. It's one of those ones you kind of have to leave on the board and say, let's see what AI can do. And I definitely wouldn't throw it away. That's what I'll say. So, some of the other things for those who may not be familiar with Sasquatch or Bigfoot, or why people think that this thing is real and it's out there, are some of the. Okay, this is one of the guys. I'm not sure which guy this is, but I got it because he was holding the footprints, just so you can get an idea what these footprints look like in a cast and how big these things are. Those are huge feet. Now, those feet belong to a body that would have to be what people say, maybe 9, 10 feet tall. You would think something about nine, right in that range. Those feet belong to something that big. Now, to be fair though, because skeptics will definitely want to chime in on that conversation and say, well, yes, Bigfoot has been talked about in the indigenous tribes over time, but as far as in pop culture in westernized in the westernized world, Bigfoot just really came to prominence in the Patterson Gimlin time frame. Right around then, maybe a little bit earlier, was the first modernized conversation on Bigfoot. That's where a lot of people say, well, hey, that kind of just started right around that time. So how is it that you're I'm supposed to believe that this is real? But we have the indigenous tribes, thankfully, to be able to lean on to say, no, it's actually been talked about a lot longer than that. So I think that kind of helps that conversation. As again, you can see these foot casts. This is from the incident. Apparently, these are the cast from the Bigfoot that you just saw walking through the screen there. Okay, getting into it. Some other things that are kind of staples for Bigfoot would be these dwellings and these stick structures. Now, this reminds me of Blair Witch Project, right? This is I never really understood why they would do this, and maybe someone out there can tell me why, because it doesn't seem to be a shelter of any sort. But according to this, physical signs in the environment, such as dwellings and stick structures, have also been attributed to Bigfoot activity. These constructions range from simple bent saplings to intricate, if I could bring those up, to intricate lattices of branches. Now, this is more of a uniform sort of structure. I don't know. They say it's built by Bigfoot. I don't have any evidence to say whether it was or whether it wasn't. It's very compelling. The sticks used to build this look pretty big, pretty complex. We know there's hoaxers out there, so I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But these constructions range from simple bent saplings to intricate lattices and branches, sometimes arranged in geometric patterns or leaning against each other in seemingly deliberate formations. While natural phenomena or human activity could explain some structures, others defy easy classification, with speculation about an intelligent builder with unknown motives. Please, I mean, let's make this make sense though. I don't understand why Bigfoot would build this. I don't get it. Is it for us to discover? But then I don't why okay, so we discover it, then what? I'm not sure where I would go. I would assume someone built that for shelter, right? But if you're 10 feet tall, and actually, let me see, is that a person? Because that might be actually. Let me look at this here. Does that seem to be no? Okay, so you can't really tell how tall it is, but you'd assume if it's a shelter for a 10 foot creature, it probably would have to be pretty big. But I don't know, right? I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's just another piece of evidence that's out there that is used to say, hey, Bigfoot's real. So you got footprints, you got these stick structures. Also, you end up having wood knocking, which is something that pretty much every Bigfoot researcher I've talked to has talked about. being in the forest and hearing knocking on the tree. I've heard different reasons for why that may be. It may be to I've the best uh argument I've heard for why they do that is to indicate to other Bigfoot in the area that there are humans present in the forest. And I've even had a person say that it may even be down to how many times they knock, right? So if they knock once, then they're indicating to other Bigfoot in the area that they've spotted one human or one person in the area. If they knock twice, then there's supposed to be two humans and so on and so forth. That's what I've heard, right? Nothing to be able to validate that. But once again, this is the evidence that's used to say, hey, Bigfoot's out there, right? So footprints, these stick structures, the wood knocking, which is a phenomenon where loud resonant knocks echo through forested areas, often reported during Bigfoot investigations. Most believe these sounds serve as communication signals between creatures, as we just said, or as territorial markers. The practice of using wood knocks to elicit responses has become a standard technique among field researchers, though definitive proof linking the sounds to Bigfoot remains elusive, right? Because you have hoaxers out there. So is something wrong here? Okay, calling during the show. You guys can hear me, right? Go ahead, throw a one up if you can hear me. All right, so once again with the wood knocking, right? So you don't know who's making the noise, right? And I think that's where it's like, okay, it's okay. Let me. Who is this calling me here? Some random person. All right, if you're calling me, stop calling until the show's over. All right, thank you, Deb from Sacramento. Appreciate you. Yeah, this isn't the call-in show, so we don't call in during this show. Yeah, not Magneticus. There's someone calling, but we don't. This isn't the show to call in on. So call me after the show. All right. So with that being said, these shelters here, you don't know who built them, so you can go ahead and say that a human built it. You can say Sasquatch built it. You could say a bear built it with good finger work. There's a million things you could say, but it's attributed to Sasquatch for whatever reason. And truthfully, I don't really know. Deb from Sacramento says that shelter is proof that Bigfoot taught the Indians how to build teepees. Oh, is that what the word is, Deb? Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, the thing is that when we talk about proof, if we're like, okay, let's go present, we have a case, let's go present this to the people that need to know, so we can say, hey, Bigfoot is here, and these are the facts, right? And if we take them just stick structures, if we just take them, cast footprints, that's probably the most compelling piece so far. But if we take any of this other evidence, I don't think it just doesn't. We can't tie it to Sasquatch in general. We just the thing that I hear about the wood structures is that okay, something really big had to do it, and I think that's the argument. Is like doesn't seem like a human could reach that high or snap this particular branch in this fashion, and that's kind of the argument that you hear there that ties this to Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Now, this is another one here, and we have hoaxers out there, right? So Bigfoot hoaxers know that these structures are supposed to tie to Bigfoot. They would definitely be the ones to build something like this as well, right? And I think they probably have in some cases. The next one is the Sierra Sounds. And I think somebody just mentioned that in the chat. So you're like right on time. Let me see. Let me go back to see what a few of these people are saying here. Okay. Anyone who else has heard the recordings and documented case actually in the Sierra Mountains? Yeah, and we're about to talk about that right now, which is the sounds and callings, right? Because you hear these vocalizations, right? Is what I'm hearing in the forest. You hear these Bigfoot vocalizations that apparently to people who are in the woods all the time and are used to hearing animal sounds and pretty much can tell what animal is making what sound will tell you that they hear these yelps or these I don't even know what you would call them, vocalization, we'll just call them that they are tying to Bigfoot because they're saying, hey, there's nothing else known in the forest that makes this sound, right? And it's booming. It's a booming sound that carries across a large area, right? Which would tie into something with a big chest cavity, right? And so, I can see where the evidence could link there, right? It makes sense. It makes sense. And so you have to ask yourself, well, if they're right there in your face like that, then why would they seem to be so elusive? Right? Some people talk about they see them showing like a shimmering effect, which is like the predator sort of camouflage, sort of, you can kind of see it there sort of situation. And then sometimes just blending into the foliage. Some people will say they see Bigfoot and then they attempt to follow where it's going and it just disappears. So a lot of people have thought, okay, maybe that's it stepping back through a portal because some people feel like Bigfoot steps in and out of a separate dimension, right? I've heard people even say that they feel like there's special properties within the hairs, like hollow hair follicles, that allow their fur to take on the coloring of the surrounding areas, right? Almost like reflecting through the hair. So if he's in a green foliage area, then because the hair follicles are hollow, that they would take on the characteristics or the color of the surrounding area. That's just a theory, right? Because we haven't had one to have hands on to have actual hair samples. And I know some of you say, well, no, there's hair samples out there. We'll get to those, believe me, here in just a moment. But I had to ask this question. How would you know if you did see the shimmering effect that 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 particular thing was a Sasquatch? I've shown you pictures of a shadow person, which seems to be like just a foggy sort of apparition. You hear in the paranormal space where they talk about that same sort of effect. Even in the UFO community, you've heard it talked about extraterrestrials also taking on that effect. So when we see the shimmering effect, how do we know we're actually seeing Sasquatch? Is it because it's in the forest at the time? Right? Is that something we could use for evidence? Could we use that as evidence that is Sasquatch? I don't know if we can. Just being middle of the road, open minded, realistic, could you say that? Or would it be more of a, it couldn't be anything else. It's gotta be that sort of approach. I also had another question about this as well, more so about the vocalizations, right? Because one thing I thought about, I was like, why do they vocalize? When you think about animals in the wild, out in the forest, they vocalize to communicate. You have wolves that howl to alert other pack members of location or of, you know, uh, to call them to come, or you have, maybe to scare something off or to assert dominance in some sort of way. Is that what's happening with Bigfoot vocalizations? Is that why they would do that? It makes sense that they would, but the conundrum that I'm having is I've heard that Bigfoot also is concerned about being located by human beings. So then why would they vocalize and then give up their location? That's the thing that was bothering me about that. It's like, okay, vocalize, but then if you know, as long as you have two ears, you can echolocate, or you can locate where a sound is coming from. So if it's happening often enough, or if you're close enough to the vocalization, you could essentially tell what direction it came from. You should. I haven't been there in person to know this, but you would assume with sound you can determine which direction sound is coming from. Maybe it's different when you're in the forest. I don't know. You have a lot of trees there that might deaden the sound, so maybe it isn't as clear, you know, the direction it may be coming from. That could be a thing. But then I also thought about, okay, Bigfoot are supposed to be telepathic, right? I've even heard some experiencers talk about they have an ability to mind speak. So if they wanted to communicate with each other, wouldn't that be the method of communication, you would think? Or is it a little bit of both, potentially? Right? You'd have to ask that question, because when we talk about extraterrestrials, in a lot of those encounters, it's all telepathy. There is no verbal communication, right? So you'd have to ask yourself, why wouldn't they just use this mind speaking ability that they have? Because they could just talk to each other, or they can just talk to a human being, or I would assume talk to other animals in the forest. If they can talk to human beings in this fashion, I would assume they could communicate with anything that has a conscious, right? Consciousness. I don't know. I don't know. So we get into some of the more, I think, more some of the more solid evidence. If we, and this is probably where we should start. Like the other things we talked about, I think are cool, but is that the standard for evidence, right? I think the things we've mentioned kind of comes with, so after you've presented, you know, high level evidence, that you also in a side conversation say, yeah, and by the way, they build these structures, and they, yeah, you know, sometimes you can hear some yelling, sometimes we're not sure what it is. I think that sort of evidence goes, is like a side dish to what the compelling evidence should be, right? And we're going to kind of get into some of this, because we're going to talk about the hair samples, right? That's a good one. That's a physical something that can be taken into a lab, tested, and is something that I think is probably like a basis or a standard. Should be like the bare minimum standard is hair samples. It has hair. If you're a human being, if you're a man over 40, most men, you know, you lose hair. If you're a woman that runs a brush or comb through your hair enough, you know you shed hair. If you got dogs running around the house, you definitely know that living animals shed hair. So it shouldn't be so hard to find hair. Hair should be the thing you should definitely find. They're covered in hair. So you know those little lint roller things, we need to take some of those out into the forest, because you would assume in the locations that Sasquatch has been, that you should be able to take that little roller, roll it across the ground, and come up with some hairs. You'll probably come up with all sorts of hairs, because once again, any living thing with hair sheds hair. So you'll probably get a mix of everything, but I'd rather get a mix of everything and have a chance of getting at least one Bigfoot hair in that mix, because that hair is going to be something you could take to the lab, run DNA, and find out what it ties back to. and we have DNA samples of basically everything else in the forest. So I think that would be a worthwhile sort of thing. And maybe there's researchers out there that are doing that. I haven't heard it, but you know. And so getting into the scientific part of this, the part where I think, you know, we should be at least starting on this level when we're talking about gathering data and evidence to validate Bigfoot or Sasquatch and kind of put it on the map is hair. So, scientific attempts to analyze potential Bigfoot evidence have often centered around hair samples and DNA testing. In 1976, renowned Bigfoot researcher Peter Byrne submitted alleged Bigfoot hair samples, which is depicted here on the screen. And actually, I realized I was still off screen here. All right. Renowned Bigfoot researcher Peter Byrne submitted alleged Bigfoot hair samples to the FBI for analysis, highlighting the seriousness with which some entities approach these claims. The FBI's findings, though eventually declassified, indicated the samples were from known animals. So, but at least it was an attempt. It was an attempt to submit something physical, saying, hey, this is weird. I don't know what it is. It could be Bigfoot hair. And knowing that by submitting that evidence, that once they ran tests on that, if it did come back as something strange, then there you go, right? And I think that's like the bare minimum we should be doing is trying to gather physical evidence out there because hair should be something that's very abundant. It's probably 1 billion hairs on one Sasquatch. And if you're talking about a family of Sasquatch or a tribe or a clan, we're talking. All right, yep. I think we went offline for a moment and we are back, right? How long were we off? Let me see. We had a hiccup there. I just want to make sure you guys didn't miss too much. Miss too much here. Okay. All right. So hair, hair, and I read this is Peter Byrne. If you didn't hear me, the article I read, but Peter Byrne in 1976 submitted what he thought was hair, Bigfoot hair, to the FBI. They ran tests on it. It came back to known animals in the forest. So did not, hit for Bigfoot. But what I was saying was that should be the standard, right? That should be there's billions of hairs out there, Sasquatch hairs, I'm sure just laying on the ground. There's gotta be. There's gotta be. So I think that would be one of the main things. If I'm going out in the field, right, like tomorrow, if I decide tomorrow to go out in the field, I'm taking one of those little roly lit things, man, and I'm gonna roll it on the trees. Okay, this is a hot spot. This is a known area. Well, we're gonna take these roly pads and we're gonna roll them all around, and we're gonna pick up as many hairs as we can, and hopefully at least one ends up being belonging to Bigfoot. Now, even moving further than that, because we're talking about DNA, because DNA, if you can get something like that, which should be achievable, DNA is going to be like one of the minimum standards because it's like at least with extraterrestrials, they're hairless, right? So they do visit. Do they leave residual things around when they have encounters? I don't know. I brought that up as far as like Varginha, Brazil, where the aliens they came across the alien in town, and I'm like, okay, where it was sitting at, maybe there's some sort of biological material left behind that we could sample, even though it's no longer there, right? It should be a thing. With Bigfoot though, because they're covered in hair, it should be way easier to get that type of data. Now, Dr. Melba Ketchum, which has been a controversial figure when it comes to Bigfoot research, and I think an example of, one of the things that I think is wrong and why we can't get to validating Bigfoot is because we have people who, for one, maybe not be handling data right, or taking the proper approach to procure the data, protect it, and then get it to where it can be analyzed. And I think that was something that would happen with Melba Ketchum. But then there's also something I want to show you because you know, it's just a big question mark about that whole situation there and the validity of what they were actually doing. So, adding to the controversy, Dr. Melba Ketchum's DNA study, which claimed to identify Bigfoot's genetic material, faced criticism and allegations of compromised results due to conflicts of interest linked to her clientele from a pet store business. Such disputes emphasize the challenges of validating Bigfoot evidence within the scientific framework. And I had actually saw something where apparently she would have customers, and I can't say this is true or not. I just heard someone say this, that she was the owner of a pet store. Tell me if I'm wrong here. And that I guess she was facilitating providing DNA results for pets for her clients or customers, and she was botching that. And so it would the whole idea of that being said was to say, okay, well, then the Bigfoot data was definitely botched or mishandled, essentially. So now I know there's a lot of people out there that love Dr. Melba Ketchum, and I know there's people that absolutely think that she's on the other side of the spectrum. I don't have an opinion either way. I don't have anything invested in that. My goal here is just to make sure that we understand what data is being presented and kind of understand why Bigfoot isn't on the map yet, and then actually setting a bar or a standard for what should be collected or even other things that we could do while out there collecting evidence in order to bring this to the forefront. Because I do feel like there's definitely a group of people out there who have seen something that they are calling Bigfoot, something that's big and that scared them. And I would love to get answers on that. So I wanted to play this here because when I originally looked into Dr. Melba Ketchum, this is probably a year or so ago. That's when I kind of found out the whole story, and you know, I was like, wow, okay, someone brought forward Bigfoot evidence. Wow, that's awesome. And then as I went through the story, I found out that what people were saying about her afterwards, right, is not so good. So she was recently on a podcast, and I got to give a shout out to the Untold Radio Network, where this gentleman, and he's a Sasquatch, he's in the Sasquatch field as well, but he hosted, members of the Bigfoot Genome Project, and there were a few guys there and Dr. Melba Ketchum. For whatever reason, she didn't want to come on camera to have the conversation. I always feel weird about that when a guest doesn't want to show their face and then spew, their facts of the case. Because like you got to read body language, you got to see facial expressions. All those things matter. So when you have a person that doesn't want to come on camera, it usually feels like because they don't want to be found out, or they because all the body language people out there that they just don't want to get called out. And that could just be me, my opinion, just saying that. But I do want to play this here because I did see this. This was pretty. It was just very off-putting how defensive that she is when it comes to having this conversation. And it's like, I applauded you initially because I'm like, hey, you're doing something to try to move this forward. DNA is definitely the route to take, but then come to find out that you're not submitting Bigfoot hairs for analysis. It's something else, right? And she's very defensive about it. Another thing you'll see in this clip as well is there's a guy on there. I guess he was part of the team. His name is Randy Bryson or Breeson. He was on a bunch of those Finding Bigfoot shows that they showed on TV, but he was part of the team. And you're going to see, well, I won't even tell you. He's part of the team. Watch this, and then I'll let you know what happened with it. Let me bring it into the feed here. All right. Shout out to this is Untold Radio Network. This show is actually called the Sasquatch Outpost Podcast. So let me go ahead and bring that up here. Let me change my screen here. All right, this is the Sasquatch Outpost Podcast. There's like two spots here that I wanted to play. We will start with her rant, which happens at about 1:20. All right, we'll just start it from here.
You're about to lose $40,000 for your...
No commercials. All right, let's check it out. And this is fair use as well. Don't flag me. Shout out to the Untold Radio Network.
Sasquatch Genome Project Revisited. This is a chance for any of you to ask questions. Some of you have asked questions, and we've made a note of those so that any of our guests can answer. Those who are with me are laughing at me with this green, because it's green. It looks invisible with the green of any study like the one we're talking about, the Genome Project study, is getting peer reviews, and they're laughing at me. So
reviewers, so I know what I'm talking about here. And what happens is once you remove the...
Let me go back.
So that any of any study like the one we're talking about, the Genome Project study, is getting peer reviews, and you've been criticized because you weren't reviewed in a major...
I can't understand you.
You can't?
I'm getting feedback, and I don't know why.
Rude.
Everything looks good on our end.
Can you remove the other people just long enough to...
We can try that for a second. Yeah.
Try that, if you would.
Okay.
All right, I can hear you fine.
Okay. So I'm asking about the peer review criticism that the paper that you and the others wrote was not reviewed in a major journal, reputable journal, quote unquote. So that's a very important aspect, and that's been a criticism. How would you answer that?
Oh, easily. We were accepted to go to peer review on Nature, which is probably the foremost scientific journal in the world. Now, that was quite the achievement, because only 1 in 9 papers even makes it to peer review. And they sent it out to these 4 peer reviewers. And I was a peer reviewer, so I know what I'm talking about here.
Okay, so she's already getting sassy, but I just want to point out that the gentleman in the lower left corner was Randy Bryson. He's the guy we're going to talk about right after this clip, but I do want to let you hear her explanation about the question that this gentleman just asked, why it wasn't peer reviewed by like a reputable source. So here she goes.
And what happens is once they accept it and the peer reviewers read it and they don't throw it out and say, no, it's not worth publishing. If they do that, you're done. It never publishes. But if they think it's worth publishing, they give their opinions. They send it back and say, we want these things changed or these things done. And we had 4 reviewers. The first one passed it with minor verbiage changes. The second one didn't read it, but he didn't reject it. He just said he wanted to see the mitochondrial whole genomes. Well, we already had them in there, so we showed him where they were because it was a long paper. The third one made fun of us, actually laughed and said, you mean a human, had sex with, something? And it was a really smart aleck response and very unprofessional, but he didn't reject it. The fourth one said, I want A, B, C, D, E. I want 5 things. And he named them off, and one of them was whole genomes. Because we didn't have, when we first did the paper, we only did what was enough for species that we did have a new species, like the one that PLOS, another journal, did on a monkey. They passed one on a monkey that had only like 3,000 bases, and we had 16,000 just in the mitochondrial, not counting the nuclear. Anyway, so what I'm basically saying is they passed the paper with revision. So we came back and we did everything they asked us to, because that's how you get it done, is you have to satisfy these 4 reviewers.
Okay.
So for everything they asked, we went one at a time, addressed them, said, this is how it was, this is how it is now. Now, what they do generally is they'll go ahead and they'll look at it the second time, and if it meets their criteria that they wanted done, they pass it. If not, they send it back again and say, well, we want more, or we want this, that, or the other. So basically, we were well on our way at Nature, of all places, to publish. Now, it took us a while to get the whole genomes. It took us months. So it was a while before we were able to get it back to them. They sent them to the same people, except somebody, probably the government, had gotten to them, because the first one came back after we corrected everything he wanted and says, oh, I'm not qualified to review this. I went, huh? You passed it before. Why are you suddenly unqualified? The second one, who didn't read the paper, comes back again and says, you don't have any materials and methods in it. Well, the editor at Nature had told us to put the materials and methods in a supplemental document, which we gave them because the paper was so long. And it says in the paper to go to this supplement to see the materials and methods. So he, once again, did not read the paper. The third one, I had complained about his lack of professional review. And he came back, and the bottom line was, his last parting shot was, it's probably contaminated, and I just don't believe it. Once again, not professional. I don't believe it shouldn't come into scientific evidence. The fourth one refused to even look at it again. So they didn't publish. So normally what you do, if you don't get one, there's a bunch of journals out there, you go to the next journal and you get them to publish it.
Okay.
We found at every turn, they refused to even look at it or send it for peer review. Now, I reviewed PLOS. Now, PLOS is one of your lesser journals in that they'll publish nearly everything. And they take, I know, I've seen papers that had to go 5 and 6 times back to get published because there were so many errors. But the science was sort of there, so you go ahead and you make them fix it. They would not even take it for peer review. They refused to even look at it. And I found that was the case with all of these. And we finally found, and so somebody had gotten to them and said, no, we're not having this paper published. We found a journal that was brand new. And apparently it was under their radar, so they had not contacted them. And they took it. They had it peer reviewed. It passed.
Okay, we'll stop that. I'll stop that right there because I want you to guys, if you want to see the full thing, you guys, I have the link in the description and you guys can go watch that after the show here. So this is what I wanted to do, right? Okay. She is giving her grievance on she feels like the peer review process wasn't fair, wasn't handled properly. But we're going back now to evidence that's presented, right? We're talking about the evidence that's presented in a peer review paper. Now, she mentioned one thing that one of the peer reviewers had a problem with, and it was the fact that, let me get this out of here. Hold on here. All right. It was the fact that they had mentioned in the paperwork that there was that the Sasquatch had actually mated with human beings. Now, I haven't heard that. I've talked to a lot of different individuals. Let me see if I can get this off the screen here. Okay. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of researchers, and I have never heard about Sasquatch taking women and then mating with them. But that's what's being told here. That's what was submitted in the paperwork. Where's the? Is there evidence of that? Is that something that you put in peer review paper? Is that something you probably could have left out? That's all I'm saying. What is the standard for evidence? She said the person laughed at that. I have never heard this ever. I've never heard that Bigfoot had mated with a human being. And I actually had the clip. I can't believe I went away from it that fast, but there's the clip of them saying this. And it was just, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, if you want to be taken seriously, whether it's the truth or not, could you potentially go without that part of the conversation? Right? Couldn't that be something that you save for later? If that wasn't included in the paperwork during the peer review process, would this have been handled differently? Would this have been looked at differently? Right? You said she had been gaslit. I see that in the chat. That she had been gaslit, and that's why she's feeling defensive. Well, let's look at the standard of evidence that we're presenting to the public. Right? I think that's one of the big problems. Let me bring it back here again, because this is the part actually where they talk about that. Let me see. Make sure I get that up here. Yeah, definitely. You definitely have to hear that for context, because I don't know how you prove that, right? How do you prove that happened? How is that? Where's the evidence to back that up, to put that in the peer review paperwork? That's all I'm saying. Because we're wondering why the subject isn't being taken seriously next to UFOs, which is crazy, because we're talking about aliens coming from another star system through space, likely in a vehicle that moves faster than light, which sounds bananas, but it's apparent that that's what's happening. But we have the evidence to back it up, because we have the craft in the sky. We have data that shows that these things are here. So they had to get here, which means that when we say they traveled at faster than light speed from another star system, or they hop through a portal, or however, whatever angle you take, they're here. So we know that one of those things has to be true, whichever one it is. But when you talk about Bigfoot, and you're going to submit a peer review paper that says that they mated with human beings, now that you have to feel like, okay, maybe that's a step too far. Okay, here it is. I was blown away when I heard this, and it's I'm not saying it's not true, because I can't say it's not true. There's no way I could even say that. But what I'm saying is when you're sifting through your data and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to submit. This is what we're going to use to validate Bigfoot and let the world know that this thing is here. Is this something that you could have potentially just left out? All right. Let me get that to play for you here.
Does that make sense?
Okay. It does. So the brain
You
fart.
might let Randy address that if he'd like.
Yeah, sure, Randy,
Talking about
from the Native American side.
talking about the Sasquatch taking the women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that happened a lot over here in Chehalis on the Chehalis Reserve. It's near Harrison Hot Springs, and people know where that is. There's a couple of girls that were taken, and one was taken to a cave. And she had a baby, and then she was the Sasquatch brought her back after about a year because she complained she was sick. She was missing her family, and then she had her baby, and of course it died. Right. So that's one of the stories there.
How long ago would that have been?
Oh boy, it was a long time ago. Might have been
So
late
she-
1800s, early 1900s.
So the
1920s
Sasquatch
maybe.
mated with her.
Yeah.
Is that the Sasquatch bred with this woman and they created an offspring? Wow. Can't imagine what that was like.
Yeah.
You know, up in northern British Columbia where I am, just so you know, I mean, they were back, basically less than 100 years ago in that area, about 75 years ago, the kid, their grandparents had told them, I mean, the girls, they cut their hair short so they would look like men because it was a thing they were scared of. They were stolen. I mean, they would be grabbed by a Sasquatch, and they kept their hair short so they thought they were men. And that's what they did. Yeah.
What's amazing is that pairing could create a viable offspring.
Yeah. There was one in the States that happened too. Then that it's the same thing happened, and the baby didn't survive either.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to play that because how does that sound to you? Even if that is true, would if you were in the room with them putting this peer review paperwork together, would you say, yeah, put that in there? Yeah. Or would you want to have some sort of something to back that claim up? That's what I'm saying. The standard of evidence, you can't just throw anything at this and you got some good evidence here, but then you throw something like this in, which on the face of it, most people aren't going to take that seriously because how do you know this? How do you know that Bigfoot took this woman, kept her for a year, impregnated her, and then let her go back home a year later and the baby passed away? How? Like, where's the evidence for that? That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem when you get into stuff like that. You can't validate that. The standard for evidence should be set a lot higher than just passing on a All right, looks like we had another internet issue here, but I'm just saying, right? Could it have happened? Sure. If these things are potentially human beings, as a lot of people say, they're just another form of humans, then the compatibility potentially is there. But I'm just saying, I've talked to a lot of researchers, and this isn't something they've ever brought up, right? It's not, it doesn't seem like this is a fact or something that is well known within the community. So I'm just like, why would you present this as evidence in a peer reviewed paper? Like you're wanting to be taken seriously. You're on news networks talking about, hey, we're presenting this paperwork. We have this DNA. It could be Bigfoot. This could be the thing that opens up the door. That's a big deal. But then in that paperwork, if you're also going to include that Bigfoot kidnapped this woman and held her captive for a year, had a baby with her, that's where you kind of probably should have left that out. So that once again, standards of evidence, there should be a bar set across the Bigfoot community that says we won't, like, it needs to be this. We need this level of evidence before we submit peer review paperwork. Because I think if you don't, then you do yourself a disservice, or you do the whole conversation a disservice. But the reason I wanted to show you the gentleman in the lower left corner, who is Randy Bryson, is because he's part of the team, right? And I am in a boat where, you know, if you are about serious research, then do you include in your team a person who has been, caught hoaxing a Bigfoot experience? If I'm on a team and I'm putting together peer review paperwork, it's all about credibility of the individual submitting the information. So someone that's a known liar, you probably don't want on the team, right? Just say, hey, sit this one out. We'll submit the paperwork. We'll leave out the Bigfoot taking the woman's story and having the baby. We'll leave that part out too. We'll submit the DNA evidence that we have, which is really the main thing, the meat and potatoes, the thing that really should have been the focus of that peer review study. But they didn't do that, right? And I'm saying, if you have the conversation beforehand on what the standards are, then I think that might turn out differently. I think that whole situation with the peer review paperwork turns out different, right? And that's kind of the reason why we're even talking about this right now. But Randy Bryson, the guy in the lower left corner of the screen, the hoax part, I wanted to make sure you guys saw that, because it lets you know, even though you probably, a lot of people look at it like, oh, they're trying to do good work. It's a credible team. They were gaslighted and they just didn't get a chance because of the stigma. Part of that could definitely be true. But then when you have someone on the team that that was known for this, and actually this is shout out to the tall ones. I just found this and I included this in the show because I thought it was definitely relevant when we talk about character. We talk about character of the ones that are submitting evidence. That's key too, not just the standard of evidence. It should be at a certain level, but also the credibility of the person that is now part of bringing this evidence forward definitely matters and comes into play too. If you want this to be taken seriously on the global level, where it's like you want awareness for Sasquatch out there. If I'm part of this team, this guy isn't part of the team then. If he's a hoaxer, he can't be part of the team. If we're going to submit this paperwork that could be viewed by some of the top scientists in the world, then we're going to leave out the parts we can't really validate or back up. Right? That's the responsible thing to do. So this is what I came across, and this is pretty interesting. Should let you know about, if they knew that this person was like this and still allowed him to be part of the team. Well, it kind of tarnishes the image of the whole movement. So let's take a look.
All right, today we're talking about hoaxing, specifically a hoaxer named Randy Bryson. Now, Randy Bryson is a Bigfoot investigator out of Canada. During a group outing in Canada with Thomas Steenberg, Bill Miller and some other people, Randy Brisson was caught red-handed throwing a rock and blaming it on Bigfoot. So this is 100% confirmed. Thomas Steenberg saw Randy Brisson throw the rock, then try to blame it on Bigfoot. So this really isn't up for debate if he is a hoaxer or not. He is a hoaxer, which then calls into question everything he's done up to this point. Now, Randy is well known for being on Surviving Man Bigfoot and also for that photo of what he is saying is a Bigfoot head. Now, John Kirk and Thomas Steenberg actually found where that photo was taken of that head. And as you see in the photo, there's no way that that is a Bigfoot head. It looks like he just created a ball and drew Bigfoot on there and just kind of put it there. And you know, the other suspicious thing is that there's only one photo when there should be more than one photo. So that there is also a red flag. But since we now know Randy Brisson is a hoaxer, you know, we can safely say that that photo is not real. And it's okay to go to that thought process because Randy was already caught lying and manipulating a group of people with his Bigfoot evidence. So it's not that far of a stretch to say, hey, Randy would also hoax this as well and the other video that he has as well. So there's zero reason to believe that anything coming out of the Randy Brisson camp is legitimate. He's been a proven hoaxer. So that's kind of where we're at with it. So there's also the Randy Brisson fan club people that will likely support him in hearing this and probably say that me and Thomas and everybody else are just jealous of Randy because he's out there getting all this quality evidence and whatever. You know, that type of argument is ridiculous and laughable. It's just, you know, it's the only defense that you really can give in this case because, you know, you can't address the facts that he was caught hoaxing. You have to come create it like, oh, we're the ones that are causing the issue and we're the ones that are, you know, up to no good, when in fact you're just kind of protecting somebody who lied and manipulated to you. So, you know, you don't want to be in that type of relationship with somebody. So, you know, if you're watching this and a supporter of his, you might want to think twice about it because, you know, like I say, it's 100% confirmed Randy Brisson is a hoaxer. Zero reason to believe it. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, hey, Brent, don't you ever talk about more positive Bigfoot stuff and stuff that will help lead us to Bigfoot or whatever? And yeah, you know, I do at times, but I also feel that there's a lot that we can learn in the hoaxing aspect of the subject, the underbelly of the subject. We can identify how hoaxers will operate, that they are actually in fact in this subject, and that these are the different tactics that they'll use to hoax and keep their hoax going and to get their followers to go attack the people who are pulling up the evidence to show that they're hoaxing. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at with this whole thing, and it's up to everybody if they want to believe Thomas or not. I, for one, truly believe Thomas. He has a lot of integrity, never lied about anything, and, you know, it's not that far of a stretch to think that Randy is hoaxing all his evidence and everything that he's talking about. And, you know, Randy is a Bigfoot influencer, so he is held to a higher standard than most. And, you know, when you're a Bigfoot influencer and you get caught hoaxing, well, you got to expect videos like this to be made and that information to come out. So, you know, moral of the story is don't hoax because people will eventually find out. And at that point, you're done. Your integrity's gone. That's your legacy right there, is a hoaxer. So it's best to never go down that road. Best to keep it honest, even though it's not the popular route to go, but it will, in the long run, give you the answers that you'll hopefully are looking for. So without further ado, here is Thomas talking about catching Randy Brisson red-handed throwing that rock and blaming it on Bigfoot.
But there are a lot of hoaxers that I made angry because I wouldn't play their game. Or I had the unmitigated nerve to expose their nonsense. One Randy Brisson here in Lower Mainland, British Columbia, Golden Ears Park. I mean, I caught him red-handed throwing rocks. He still to this day denies it, but And he's got his little legion of followers who take
Yes.
his word as gospel. So, hey, go ahead. Like I said, inmates running the asylum. The inmates aren't really interested in me or my opinions.
Right, but you had somebody else stay behind a little bit too, so there was somebody else who saw him throw.
Oh, I knew something. The whole group knew it by the end of the trip. Yeah, and I just told one guy, hey, keep behind him. Don't let him get in behind the group, because every time something happens, when he disappears to the side, to the rear. Point is, like most hoaxing, they can't stop themselves, and he had to get that last rock in, and he happened to throw it right when I was looking at him. So.
So that's what I'm talking about. So that's a rock throwing incident, right? And we know a lot of people talk about hearing rocks being thrown, and we know there's hoaxes out there, right? So even though it could be Bigfoot throwing the rock, is that really a standard of evidence to say that this is what it is, right? When you got someone that is the guys you saw, just for to preface that, the guy who was speaking originally there is a Bigfoot researcher as well. He's in the Bigfoot field. And this is what I applaud, right? Self-policing within the community. Because hoaxers shouldn't be part of the conversation, because what do? They muddy the waters, and they potentially get peer-reviewed papers rejected, right? Because who's submitting this information? What group? Okay, you're affiliated with hoaxers and you're submitting a peer-reviewed paper? How do you think that peer-reviewed paper is going to be taken? Who would let that paper go through? That's what I'm saying. Self-policing within the community. This is why I feel like the Bigfoot community needs to become more unified, and they need to set a standard of evidence to say, hey, we need at least this. And we need to make sure that everyone that is a part of this is above board, because there's 3 other people involved in that, and they could all be above board. But if this one person is a hoaxer, then it wrecks the credibility of the entire operation. And then now data that might have been good doesn't even get considered, right? So there needs to be a standard there. This is what I observe when I look at the Bigfoot community. Like I said in the beginning, I talk to enough people to know, just from the look in their eyes and the way they retell the story, that they definitely encountered something, right? So now it's on the community and the researchers to make sure that the data that they are presenting is of a certain quality, of a certain level. And I just mentioned a few things you could do. Hair should be the number one thing you can find from Bigfoot out there in the wild. There should be no situation where a researcher can't go out there and find Bigfoot hair. They say, oh, he's careful. He makes sure he doesn't leave footprints. He makes sure he doesn't do that. Do you think he picks up every hair that falls off his body? I don't think that's even possible. Are you ever aware when you shed hair? So you telling me Bigfoot is aware if he loses one follicle of hair? I don't think that's a thing. And with that being said, so continued research. Let's get into that, because I'm like, okay, research has to continue. Has the government looked into this? That would be a question I would have. The same way the government has UFO files. Has the government ever looked into this? Do they have? And I believe they have. Okay, no, this is just talk. So this is the Peter Byrne. They're just talking about how they received the hairs and determined that they were not Bigfoot. But we covered that already. So moving on, we should be further along. This is the next part of the show here. We should be further along. And no, let me stop there. Also, I had to put this up because we talk about grifters in the community. A lot of people I see in the audience and in the chat say, hey, if a person's selling a book, then they're not being authentic, or they're grifting, or they're looking for, more. And I just want to point out that Dr. Melba Ketchum currently has GoFundMe up for the Cryptic Genome Project, and is stating that she's going to resubmit some evidence or something at this point, which could be an okay thing or not, depending on how you look at it. But I think it should just be put out there that she currently does have a GoFundMe where she's accepting funds to continue this journey as far as the Genome Project goes. And I say, okay, cool, but let's submit actual evidence, and let's leave out things that don't have to be in the peer review paperwork. And then it shouldn't just be her. And I don't know if you need to necessarily, well, I guess the money would be for the actual processing of the DNA. But I think as far as gathering the DNA evidence, like I said, there's hairs everywhere. There should be. So anyone should be able to do the exact same thing that she's doing. So all the researchers that are out there researching and searching for Bigfoot should be able to also gather things that they could submit for DNA testing, right? And that should be the bar. That should be the bar that's set. So we should be further along in this process, I feel like, especially if we can figure out a way to unify that community, get everybody to set a standard. Then some of the other things that I looked at, like, hey, this could probably help as well. Recurring sightings and encounters by one individual. So like a person that says, I see Bigfoot all the time, or, I've had multiple encounters with Bigfoot, right? So those would be the perfect people to validate that DNA evidence or gather hair samples for DNA testing, because you know where Bigfoot is. Bigfoot is continuously in your presence. So if Bigfoot is continuously in your presence, you have hair samples all within the vicinity. So at the very least, you'd be able to gather that type of evidence. So I would look, if I'm in the Bigfoot community and I'm looking, I'm like, man, we need to get answers here. We need to get to the truth. I would be talking to those individuals that come in contact with Bigfoot often to say, hey, next time it happens, check around to see if you can find any hairs or anything like that, right? The same way that I've said in the past, let's talk to CE5 individuals to try to call in these UFOs, because if they can do this, psionics in CE5, then we should be able to set something up where we can have someone that has the ability to call these things in to get these things on camera. It should be a thing that we could do. And I feel the same way in the Bigfoot community, where it's like, hey, if you're having all these encounters with Bigfoot, you should be able to gather some sort of evidence that moves this thing further, right? And those people in the community should be held accountable. If I'm a Bigfoot researcher, I'm like, yeah, I don't see Bigfoot all the time. I see him occasionally, or I see him once or twice. But hey, you see him all the time. So have you ever considered like maybe getting hair samples, or, you don't have to get it right off of Bigfoot, but if he's always in this area, then there's got to be something down there, right? So you go get down there and you gather up some DNA evidence so it can be submitted, so we can validate and finally put Bigfoot officially on the map, right next to UFOs, right next to ghosts and apparitions, right? And it blows my mind that, I don't think it's really, because like I said, I've talked to enough Bigfoot people to know that they all admit that there's not unity in that community, to where everyone wants to keep their evidence to themselves and they don't want to share as a community to move this narrative forward. That's what we got to change. That's the reason why we're doing this right now. And we may have a part two. I may bring in some Bigfoot researchers to kind of talk about this. Maybe we'll do that on the after hours out tomorrow. We'll see. But yeah, because they'd be perfect candidates to finally validate Bigfoot. And also, some who say they speak to Bigfoot telepathically request an in-person meeting. You know, maybe not have a trail cam or a camera right there, because I hear that they can detect or sense cameras, right? Is the thing. But it always bugs me because, okay, we got Patterson Gimlin on film. Bigfoot didn't mind that camera, so why would Bigfoot mind other cameras? Why is it, you know, what is the difference here? If Patterson Gimlin is looked at to be authentic and it's Bigfoot walking right through the frame in the middle of the day, didn't care about the camera being there, actually turned and looked at the camera, then why would it be a problem today to have a camera set up or maybe a trail cam off in the distance to where you can at least get Bigfoot walking up to your house or walking up to wherever it normally comes in at, right? That's good evidence. That's something that I think is achievable, attainable, especially with those who often encounter Bigfoot. So once again, in the community, if we're doing this as a group, as a whole, and we want to actually move this conversation, then we need to think about a standard for evidence, for validating evidence. It should be textbook. This is the procedure, textbook procedure on what we're doing to collect evidence. More unification, more structure. I think that's the word I'm looking for, is more structure to how data is collected and presented in order to kind of get to where we're going. And this is another big one. I thought about this. I was like, this would be brilliant if we can get this to work. And it is gifting sites, right? I often hear about gifting sites. And a lot of people have gifting sites with Sasquatch where they'll leave something there. And I think I have an example of one here. If I could bring it up. Yeah, right here. So like a Bigfoot gifting site. This is what this is. This is what this actually is, an actual Bigfoot gifting site. And so they're leaving trinkets and things of that nature for Bigfoot. You often hear experiencers doing this all the time. So what stops us then in knowing that this is a thing and that there's sometimes Bigfoot leaves things as gifts for those experiencers? So it's like an exchange, right? So isn't this an opportunity? Isn't this an opportunity to maybe gift them an Apple AirTag or something like that, right? Bigfoot doesn't know what an Apple AirTag is. But an Apple AirTag would allow you to track where that is taken to. So at the very least, it maybe not, I'm just being funny with the Apple AirTag. That's shout out to Apple, but any sort of tracking device that you could leave at a gifting site. So maybe you get a fake rock, or you get a rock, a real rock, you cut it open, you put in some sort of tracking device, and then you gift that, and then if it's taken, then you track where the tracker is, right? That's data. That's real data right there. And it's doable. It's doable because these exchanges take place all the time. These leaving the gifts, and then you come back and the gifts have been taken. And if they're being taken by Sasquatch and you have left some sort of tracking capability there, then they're taking it to wherever they go. So you should be able to track that. I think that's a great idea. If we're really trying to get to validating Bigfoot, that's the thing. If we're trying to validate that Bigfoot is a thing, then we have to think of things that would take us down the road to do that. The DNA evidence, the fact that hair should be everywhere. Number one, gifting. They take the gifts and sometimes they leave rocks or different things that they leave in return. They're taking the gifts. Track a tracker, simple tracker. Then you can show, okay, I left this here. This tracking thing was taken to this location. Maybe this is where we should be focusing at when trying to look or search for Bigfoot, wherever that tracker was taken to. Why not? If you're trying to get to the answers, right? As a researcher, if we were to go on an expedition into a forest, just think about this. If we all got together as researchers for Bigfoot and we go out on an expedition into the forest with a limited budget, like we don't have money to really do anything fancy or have any fancy equipment with us, what are the basic tactics or equipment to use to capture compelling evidence of Bigfoot's presence, right? And I think I couldn't answer that, because I'm not in that field to know what some of the most effective things that are like everyday items that we could use to kind of validate. But just thinking about that and then contrasting it against the same question, if I was a researcher, if we were to go on an expedition into the forest with an unlimited budget, what are the same tactics or equipment that we could use to capture undeniable or at least compelling evidence of Bigfoot's presence? And I think that goes to like the tracking device would be something that would probably be on my list if I were to answer that question. Also, 24-hour photo or video monitoring of the known Bigfoot hotspots, like maybe a camera not too far off from the gifting site. So not only tracking the item that you left as a gift, but also a camera off in the distance that's aimed right at the gifting site. Because if they're consistently coming in and taking the gifts, then we should get something. We should get some results on that. And that would be something that would be solid evidence that we could take and then submit. And this would be the standard. These are things we could definitely do and definitely do in the community. Now, you have the group that says, well, they shut cameras off. Well, they won't come around when cameras are on. And that goes back to Patterson-Gimlin. It's on camera. And if you want to believe some of the other videos that I've seen out there that are depicting Bigfoot or Sasquatch, it was on camera as well. So does it avoid cameras or does it not avoid cameras? Because if it's avoiding cameras, then what are we doing with Patterson-Gimlin? Right? Let's set standards. Let's put structure. I think it's everything is so jumbled up in the Bigfoot community. There's no structure to getting to the end. It's just like it's so discombobulated that there's no clear path to getting to that next step. And I think not just with Bigfoot, I'm just doing Bigfoot today, but any part of the phenomenon, I have the same thought process when it comes to any part, UFOs, anything. It's about getting to that next step. What can we do to get to the next step to get us closer to validation or confirmation, as Dave would say, for this part of the phenomena? I'm more UFO. So am I a researcher? I don't know if I would call myself that, but I'm always thinking of ways to try to get there. So maybe I am on some level, right? But if I was heavily into Bigfoot and I'm out there in the woods all the time, then I would be using the same thought process in that field. And I'm just saying, let's set standards for evidence when it comes to what we're going to use to validate the subject. Even thermal imaging, that was another thing. So thermal imaging cameras, right? They're warm-blooded animals, supposed to be warm-blooded animals. Let's get them on thermal imaging somehow. Maybe that's a tool to take into the field, right? Just a thermal imaging camera. Just always have one, because the Bigfoot sightings or encounters, a lot of them happen at night, and so thermal imaging would be top of the list, like something to take out into the field. So maybe that should be like the standard, is everyone should have some sort of thermal imaging device. It needs to be more uniformity. Some people just go out with cell phone cameras. Some people go out with top of the line equipment, right? But what's like, there should be like, hey, we need the bare minimum be going out with this when we're trying to determine and detect what Bigfoot is. So with that being said, these are my closing statements on this, and I still have something else to show you here. But why is it that the individuals who have frequent contact with Bigfoot are also the same people that refuse or prefer not to film or obtain anything that could be considered as compelling or validating evidence? You got to know that's not going to help move the needle forward for that getting validation for Bigfoot, and to validate those people out there who saw Bigfoot or who encountered Bigfoot and didn't get a chance to capture any data. Right? If you're seeing them all the time or you're coming in contact with them, it's your duty. And I say that within UFOs as well. Like, if you are a constant abductee, or every time you go outside you see a UFO, it's incumbent on you to capture the data, because if you really want to move this forward, your data matters and helps, everyone else, the people who either haven't seen the thing before, haven't seen Bigfoot or ET, haven't seen a UFO. Your data is what they live vicariously through you when it comes to, so it's incumbent on you to capture the data. Some researchers say they don't want to locate Bigfoot officially because they are worried of what humans will do to Bigfoot. I hear that a lot in the community, that they're like, nope, I won't give Bigfoot up. I won't tell you where it's at. I won't do it because, then humans will be after Bigfoot. And I care about Bigfoot, and I don't want that to happen to Bigfoot. How do you even know we can harm Bigfoot? How do you even know that we have the ability to even harm Bigfoot? How do you know we can kill Bigfoot? How is that more of just a human feeling or concern? We haven't had a Bigfoot body. We haven't had confirmation that Bigfoot can die. So why is it that people get wrapped up with, oh yeah, I see him, but I don't want to tell anybody where it's at. I don't want to do that. That doesn't help the research get to where it needs to go, for one. And then for two, how do you even know Bigfoot can be harmed by human beings? I don't think you do. I don't think anyone does. We have yet to find a body. So as far as we know, they don't die. Unless you had a conversation with one and they told you they die, that'd probably be the only way to know. Because outside of that, you've never seen one dead. So how do you know they die? How do you know that we could do anything to these things? You don't. So I think that's a valid point to make, because there's a lot of people out there that say that, oh yeah, I see him. We interact and all this and that, but yeah, I don't want to tell you where it's at, or I don't want to tell anyone. Well, are you a person that wants to get to further the research on Bigfoot? Because you can't have both. You can't have both. If we're trying to validate Bigfoot, put it on the map, and then get it protected. We protect all sorts of animals in the world, and Bigfoot, if it's something that could be put on that protection list, would be exactly that, but we need to validate it, because if you don't tell people and people go out there and find it on themselves and they can kill Bigfoot, well, then they can just free for all and kill every Bigfoot that they come across. So are you really helping Bigfoot by not helping validate, or are you creating a black market where anything goes when you come across a Bigfoot? Think about that. Those people who feel that way, think about that when you think about not gathering the evidence and helping validate. Because I think it needs to happen. How does anyone even know we can kill Bigfoot? As intelligent as Sasquatch is rumored to be, wouldn't you think they have the ability to defend themselves? Crafted weapons, potentially, or even taking weapons from us if they're interacting all the time, as they likely had to do this in order to survive from wherever they come from. They're still here. They've had to survive, and they can't just be surviving by hiding. I don't think that's, a thing. I don't think you can hide long enough to ensure your species survival. You have to have some sort of self-defense, as is evident in the animal world. You see, even though you have predator and prey can still defend themselves. They still have defensive capabilities. Now, does it work all the time? No, it doesn't, but it does. And usually it's pretty ingenious and effective sort of capability they have to defend themselves. Any proof that a creature may be interdimensional, are they even susceptible to human weapons? If they're stepping in from another dimension, are they even susceptible? So that's why we got to change that way of thinking. Like, oh, we're protecting Bigfoot. I just want the experience to be mine. I don't want to share it with the world. Well, the world needs to know, because it's worth validating Sasquatch in order to protect other human beings that recreationally go out into the woods to camp and have fun with their family. How would you feel if in your neck of the woods, the Sasquatch you've been dealing with, that you don't want to bring evidence forward on, that you won't tell anybody about, unalives a whole family that's on a camping trip because they know nothing about Sasquatch? They're not expecting to bump into a Sasquatch, and then they do, and then they react in a way that causes the Sasquatch to harm this family. Then by you not doing your part and saying, hey, I just want to keep this experience to myself. I don't want to tell anyone. I just want this to be me and Bigfoot. How do you help anyone else that comes across Bigfoot unexpectedly, not even expecting to see one, and then ends up in a situation where they're badly hurt or unalive? Do you say, oh, forget them, I still want to have my personal experience with Bigfoot? If they go in the woods, they know there's danger there, so forget them. I just want to have my personal experience with Bigfoot. Nah. If you're about human beings and you care about human beings, that's not the outlook that you would have. It's not the outlook you would have. So we need to set standards for validating Bigfoot evidence. And I think you might have saw this clip, this little picture, this image here that I came across here. And I just want to show this to you guys, because what do you see? Actually, I didn't go far enough. Let me see. What do you see in this? I circled this and said WTF. And I'm going to look in the chat for this. What do you see in this image? Who sees a Sasquatch? Put ones. Ones in the chat if you see the big guy himself peeking from around a tree. Well, if you said one, let me show you this.
It's a pretty good one, wasn't it? So I recorded that last month at this abandoned property that I was exploring, and so wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings, but I was working and focusing on this camera that I just bought and trying to really dial in the settings and stuff. And so when I looked up and over to my right, I was like, whoa, stopped me dead in my tracks, because at my first glance, first impression, it looked exactly like a big head with eyes, nose, mouth, ears, all that, kind of looking right back at you, peeking from behind a tree. That was literally my first impression when I saw that, and which doesn't happen quite often. And so it took me a second or two to fully process what I was actually looking at, and it was actually moss growing on some deadfall that's stuck between some trees. Literally, that's all it is. But at the right angle with the right light, it can look exactly like a big head looking tree peeking from behind a tree. And so I took some video of it too, and I had to zoom in because it was a little further away. And when zooming in and rewatching the video, it almost kind of looks like the head is moving with you. And that's the video matrixing effect that happens during recording, especially with cell phones that don't have the best sensors and stuff. So just one of the best examples that I've come across personally and seen online in many years. I just like, yeah, here, you guys got to check this out. So it's a great example of forced pareidolia. And yes, I did get Zaskied there for a moment. But this is probably what a lot of his pictures are. It's just the light hitting, the deadfall and stuff at the right angle. And that's why it's important to do a due diligence on doing a full investigation, doing size comparisons before or after, make sure it's not a stationary object. If somebody's going to release, something like that to the public, that's the due diligence that they would need to do. But I can assure you, this is exactly what I say it is. It's not a Bigfoot peeking at his head and around a tree and stuff, as much as I would love that for it to be that. But nope, that's not what this one was. So another great example. All right, that's the end of this one. We'll see you on the next one.
And that is how we'll end it. Forest pareidolia in some cases. That, when I saw that originally, I was like, wow. And you can see, even here, even though he said what he just said, we can look at that again. We're looking at the image right now, and that appears to be a Bigfoot head sticking from behind a tree. Eyebrows, eyes, nose, mouth. You can see it all. You can see it all. But guess what? It's pareidolia. That means you're seeing something that is not there. One important thing that he said was due diligence. Due diligence in the data that you bring forward. It's incumbent on you to do that. It's incumbent on you to do that because we want this to be taken seriously. We want to get to the point to where we can validate Bigfoot. Therefore, we have to have standards for validating Bigfoot. We have to set standards in the Bigfoot community. We have to do it. It needs to be more uniform. The communication needs to be better within the Bigfoot community. This is how we get to where we need to go. So just submitting something that is a blur or something that could be Ferris pareidolia or could be someone just completely hoaxing, as was shown earlier with the guy Randy Bryson, who not only hoaxed the Bigfoot rock throwing, but also hoaxed the Bigfoot peeking from behind a tree stump. You've seen a lot of those fake ones where you're like, no, that's definitely fake, right? Self-policing in the community is also key. I'm a proponent for that in the UFO community. I feel like that's the only way for, I'll just talk about ufology, which is looked at as a religion and is looked at as these are just believers who believe. And it's like, no, there is a group of people who do that in the community, and they also embellish and make up stories. Those people need to be separated from ufology. And if that means, as Lou Elizondo said, we need to blow up ufology, which is what he meant when he said that, is basically we need to separate the stories and the embellishers from the actual data. That's what Lou Elizondo was saying. And the same thing applies to the Bigfoot community. The same thing applies to the paranormal community. We know it's serious. We've seen it. We've experienced it. So when you come forward with your authentic truth, do you want that to be overshadowed or muddied by data that just isn't there, right? And you would probably say no. So once again, we need to set standards for validating really across the board, just with the phenomenon in general. But tonight we're talking about Bigfoot, and it's so unorganized as far as research goes within that community that I'm focusing on that community because I think that community could be so much further ahead in getting the answers that they all want and that I want too, even though I've never seen one and probably won't be out in the forest to do that. I want that too, because as I say in the After Hour show, the phenomena is real. We know that. And that means that there are a lot of things or anything under that is possible. That's just the truth. As weird as it may be, as weird as it may sound, we may find out down the line that Bigfoot does, mate or cohabitate with human beings on occasion. But right now, the evidence isn't there to present it in peer-reviewed paperwork. So guys, let's set standards for this and let's move the needle forward and let's get the validating. Let's stop being the laughing joke of, something that's very serious and affects a lot of people traumatically, emotionally, and let's get rid of the stigma and the ridicule. This is the only way to do it, is by setting standards for evidence, in this case, Bigfoot evidence. Thank you guys for coming on in and listening to this, but I feel like it's very important that we have these conversations, because who else is going to have them? If we don't sit here and have these conversations and just talk the real, where else are you going to hear that sort of conversation take place? You're going to hear it right here. We'll continue to do so. Once again, I do appreciate you guys coming on into the Social Dig, the definitive UFO news show. You guys enjoy the rest of your night. Think about this. Think about it. Have a great rest of your night, guys. Take care. Welcome to the Social Shop, courtesy of the Social Dig. I am Mr. Rob G, and we are bringing you exclusive gear, and tonight's no different. We have Humanity t-shirts, the positive progression of humanity. Yes, you can go out into the world and proudly show everyone what humanity means to you. $32.99. And remember, if you're a social soldier, you get an additional 20% off the price. That's right. Being a social soldier gets you an additional 20% off. And keep in mind, depending where you are in the world, shipping fees and taxes will be applied. Bringing you exclusive gear right here at the Social Shop on the Social Dig.